Hello again. Now, Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana has tabled the medium-term budget policy statement in Parliament a short while ago this afternoon. The budget provides updates on government's financial goal progress and expenditure halfway through the financial year. I mean, what's been happening since February, basically ahead of next February. Let's bring in local government and revenue expert, who's a group chief advisor of Ntiyiso Consulting, Miyelani, Holeni, to get some more reaction analysis about some of the aspects that came out. Miyelani, good afternoon. Welcome to today, and thank you very much for coming to studio.
Thank you.
Can we start with this big one in the sense of debt relief for municipalities?
Absolutely.
Because, I mean, ESCOM has got its special debt relief arrangement with government.
Yeah.
Today, the minister saying, yes, it will go ahead, but there will be certain conditions now that ESCOM must meet, including paying interest on the monies that are advanced to them in terms of paying that debt. So it's not free money anymore. It's not interest-free loan, so to speak. So it's changed that. And there was another one, which I can't recall offhand now. But with municipalities, I mean, so many of them, I think more than 60 applying for some assistance. They owe billions to ESCOM. Now, you're announcing that their debt will be written off over the next 3 years under certain conditions. Is this a significant development?
Well, it's a significant development, and looking at where the budget comes from as well, it also spoke about the same kind of relief that must be given to municipalities. It's a very important step for municipalities because they too also have a debt burden. You must remember the debt burden of municipalities is not only electricity, but there's also water. There's also the consumers that are heavily pressed, under the current economic conditions. The debt which they owe to ESCOM, if you compare it to the debt which ESCOM owes to the investors and its lenders, it's about only 23%. So that is quite significant for municipalities because also municipalities only get, anything between 10 to 12% of the fiscal allocation. So for municipalities, it will help them to start kickstarting their own operations and making sure that they can meet their obligations. And that would obviously start improving their operations with regards to the electricity business, which they share jointly with the distribution side of ESCOM.
Yeah, but this is debt owed until the end of March this year.
Absolutely.
After that, it's going to be a different story, and it's going to be written off in equal tranches over 3 years, but there will be set conditions.
Absolutely.
But he didn't specify what those would be. What do you think would make sense?
Well, I think, one of the things is that it's required that municipalities at least pay the current account. I think that is one of the key things there. And municipalities have to do certain key things which perhaps they may have been neglecting because of COVID, the likes of credit control, because in as much as, ESCOM is doing its own credit control by threatening at times to switch off the municipalities, but municipalities as well have a responsibility to get the consumer to pay their side of the bargain.
So they have to improve their revenue collection.
So they have to improve their value chain with regards to the revenue collection, but more so by making sure as well that they have accurate bills which consumers can believe, because oftentimes consumers would want to question the bills, but the credibility of those bills when they apply credit control is something that must be absolutely flawless.
Yeah, so better credit controls, better revenue collection, and making sure you meet the current account you have with ESCOM. Absolutely. But writing off this debt, I mean, it's in billions of rand. ESCOM might have been hoping it will come in as income because ESCOM just declared a loss in its financial results just yesterday. So it was a very tough balance, a tricky balance. You are helping the municipalities, but you are not getting money into ESCOM.
And I think this is where sometimes we see, in fact, most of the time we see a misalignment or disjuncture because of the business of electricity within ESCOM and the business of electricity within the municipalities are actually enjoined. So if on the one hand you are helping ESCOM and you are giving them money to buy and burn diesel, and you're not affording the municipalities money to at least, invest in embedded small-scale generation, you are kind of taking away from the winds, the sails of the wind of local government. So these two models, and we argue that, whilst you're fixing ESCOM, it is also incumbent on government to also look at fixing the model for electricity.
What would be the ideal business model then for municipalities?
The ideal
in terms of electricity.
In terms of electricity, we argue that the distribution side of ESCOM is actually what municipalities do. Because if you find a metro which has both Eskom supplied areas as well as municipal supplied areas.
So like Joburg, you've got City Power,
You have
and
City
you've got
Power
Eskom,
and you have
yeah.
Eskom as well, and so on. So you find that the Eskom tariffs are lower, then it's good for industry to be paying to Eskom. The municipal tariffs are higher. It's actually not so good for some of the industry to be paying to the municipalities. So that needs to be uniform and made at least, from a one supply point of view, because on the municipal side, there's a cross-subsidization requirement which municipalities have to undertake into other services which are not necessarily funded. But if that revenue is, a chunk of it is taken away from the Eskom side, it means that the cross-subsidization does not happen. Your municipal roads, your libraries, your swimming pools, your things that are not necessarily covered fully within the allocations that are given. So make the electricity business one between municipalities as well as Eskom. And for that matter, be bold as making sure that that distribution and the skills at least go into the municipal or local government to strengthen the
one of the things the minister
business.
mentioned this afternoon, Miyelani, was the need to amplify the capacity of municipalities to generate sustainable revenue. When it comes to electricity, as you were talking, make it one instead of having two entities, so it becomes cost effective. Should municipalities as well be allowed to produce their own electricity?
Yes, indeed. Because if you look at where Eskom is, there's big industry, there's big smelters which they supply electricity to. So the small consumer is actually, by the way, the fact that Eskom may be stuck, in the mud in terms of, areas which are not paying, like your Sowetos and your other areas which there is no credit control. Because when you have Eskom operating within there, you don't have the means to do credit control. So municipalities as well should be able to, at least within the legislation, to be generating their own electricity so that they can subsidize and increase the revenue, as well as supplying some of it to your indigents, because that is where some of the money is for municipalities, and the debt that builds up within Eskom would come from the low income as well as the indigent within the local municipality. So that is something which should be encouraged over the next 3 to 5 years, that they have those capabilities to keep on having a sustainable electricity business, because that is a major revenue earner for municipalities.
Yeah, I see the minister saying this afternoon 67 had applied to municipalities in terms of this assistance, and 28 have now been approved. The others are still being processed. I guess it's going to be very important to grant these 67 that have applied an approval as well.
Absolutely.
In terms of what is said. Okay. Yeah. Another issue that came up in terms of local government is about disaster management. I mean, there's quite a big chunk of money that the minister has announced is going towards that, especially because we had floods in different parts of the country in February and March last year. Your take on that?
So I think climate change as a whole, I think it's something which municipalities and government as a whole have not quite grasped. And this is now going to be the major disasters. If we thought COVID-19 was a major pandemic, climate change is likely to wipe away even the infrastructure which is being built, currently. It's positive that at least there's over 370 million which is being put into the response side. There's 1.2 billion which is going into the recovery. But whatever infrastructure that is put down, it has to be at least climate agnostic. It has to be infrastructure that we don't build, the same kind of infrastructure as we've always built. So there's also new methods where I think government should also be investing in innovative ways of building infrastructure which can withstand the climate change that we are likely to face, which is going to increase over the next however many years. We've seen 100-year floods, for instance, in parts of the Cape. And that is huge if you think of the fact that, a 100-year flood, coming through. Likely to have a lot more coming through in different, areas.
Yeah, severe weather systems are with us, and we don't even know when and how they will happen. We just had winter in summer the last few days in Johannesburg. Suddenly, temperatures were below 10 degrees.
Yes.
But the minister speaking, I just want to get your sense. They spoke about the need to develop a disaster risk financing strategy. After he mentioned that they're going to be assisting local governments in terms of disaster management with the amounts of money, because that is where really the pain is felt. I mean, should we not have developed this strategy already? And when we do, what are the key things to bear in mind, particularly to enable capacity of local governments to cope?
Absolutely. So climate finance is also one of the big now issues, and it will be one of the areas that is going to develop a lot more, because now financing of whatever climatic issues is one that is not well developed within our financial systems currently. We may see it with some of the development finance institutions coming up. So that means a major overhaul, even from the insurance point of view. Of course, the clause, force majeure is one that we need to tread very carefully against, because insurance companies collect, huge premiums within the space of whether it's government and private institutions. But if it comes to now paying for what is called the act of God, it's something that needs to be at least thought of very differently and developed into a very stringent climate finance regime that allows the financing of infrastructure, as well as making sure that whatever is recovery, whatever is fixing of the infrastructure, as well as we say, the innovative new ways of constructing infrastructure to lessen the need to have to bail out or to put recovery funding in place. So that is a regime that I think the minister is on the right wavelength, but this is something that will involve obviously a broader financial services sector to be able to come up with ways and means of at least financing climate-related disasters, as well as proactive climate financing for various
let's talk about the water side. We spoke about electricity when we started. Now we speak about climate change, and it's all part of the same kind of ecosystem. The minister in the budget speech this afternoon talking about the whole issue of the cooperative governance and traditional affairs minister and local governments working together to develop new funding models around water infrastructure. How important is that?
Well, water, firstly, and I think it's a note that we must always put forward. South Africa is a very water-scarce country. If you look at the weather patterns that are also coming up as well, they're pointing to the diminishing as well as reduction in the rainfall. In fact, we get most of our water from the Lesotho Highlands Development Scheme. So if you look at the local conditions, we're still waiting for it to be completed. So locally, we have projects that have stalled as well, which are supposed to be opening up major water schemes around the Val catchments and various other catchments that are supposed to be there. So water becomes very important. We've seen from a water affairs point of view, investment in sinking boreholes. That at least alleviates the water shortage in the short term. But in the long term, that needs to change, because you need to look at sustainable catchments that are going to be supplying water within the various areas. And we have rural areas as well that go for months without water, or at least water rationing. Whereas when the rains come, the floods, floods some of those areas, whereas there could be better dams that are, or catchment areas that are constructed
we're dealing with polluted water resources as well. We saw the Val River had to be drained a few years ago by the army. They could not cope in Holeni municipality.
Absolutely. So I think water is also another of the ones that at least is tied in with the climate change that needs to be watched. If we thought electricity is the worst, I think water as well as the climatic issues are coming up and are going to be quite debilitating because of the lack
in
of
a summary, as we
predictability.
wrap, and very briefly, Miyelani, so you think the minister in this particular case of local government around the issues of electricity, around the issue of municipal debt to ESCOM, around issues of water and trying to find new models, and the climate change impact, moving in the right direction, hitting the right notes a bit?
Hitting the right notes, still patching the wounds. But I think the issue here is to then look at what is the sustainable way to avoid all of this, or to create at least a forward-thinking regime that allows, for the financing of electricity properly, the water, the business model of electricity within municipalities, cognizant of the cross-subsidization, at least arena that, they provide, as well as looking at, the water situation in a much more detailed way, so that there's at least an integrated way of coming up with how to respond to some of these matters, but to also put measures that are more forward-looking and forward-thinking.
Thank you very much. That's Miyelani Holeni, local government and revenue expert and group chief advisor of Ntiyiso Consulting, just giving us some of his insights and reaction to the aspects of the medium-term budget this afternoon by Minister Enoch Godongwana, where it relates to issues of municipalities and other matters around local government like electricity, revenue generation, water, and the impact of climate change.